Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's program. My name is TJ Hicks, and I am the program coordinator here at the Rancho Mirage Library and Observatory. Really excited to have you all with us today. I have a couple announcements about some upcoming programs that we have coming up. This program was actually supposed to be at the Rancho Mirage Amphitheater, but that didn't work out due to some travel situations that came up. However, we do have some exciting programs coming up at the amphitheater, which is located at Rancho Mirage Community Park, so that we can have some in-person programming, but in an outdoor safe environment. So I wanted to let you know about that. Tomorrow we have Doug McDonald and the Coachella Valley Trio, a great jazz concert that will be at 2 p.m. And then next week, a very popular speaker will be back with us this year. Dr. William Gudalunas will be here in person at the amphitheater. He will be speaking for a 3-day lecture series on American territorial expansion from 1776 through 2022. So he's very excited about that topic. He has a lot to say. It should be fascinating. So it's a 3-day series starting next Tuesday, the 18th at 2 p.m. And then each day will be about an hour. So 2 to 3 or 3:15 on the 18th, then Wednesday the 19th, and Thursday the 20th. So we hope that you can join us at the amphitheater for those programs. And then coming up in February, we'll do another concert with pianist Scott Beatty at 2 p.m. on Wednesday, February 9th. And then hopefully we will have today's speaker, Kip Cranna, speak in our next component of this series on February 15th at 2 p.m. In person at the amphitheater. So all of the details about those programs, a lot of questions that you may have in terms of seating, parking, things like that, that's all available on our website and on our event calendar on the website. So go to ranchomiragelibrary.org to find all of that. But I also had something else I wanted to share, and that is that a lot of the programming we do, including today's program, is of course sponsored by our foundation. But a big part of that is the donations and support from our foundation through other people and organizations. And one that I really cannot say thank you enough to is the Bartush Family Foundation. The Bartush Family Foundation has supported not only this opera programming and programming that we do in conjunction with the Palm Springs Opera Guild, but also it's other programming throughout the year that we've been able to do. And that support has been steadfast through the entire pandemic and has gone back several years, and it really is a big part of why we were able to provide the high quality programming that we do each year. So a huge thank you to the Bartush Family Foundation. And then along with that, I also need to thank Jay Bartush, who is a member of our community, who actually helps out on a regular basis in person as a volunteer. And he also supports the Opera Guild as a board member and is a huge friend to the library. So we can't thank him enough. And he actually even supports additional unique opportunities through arts programming and other things needed through a special fund for the arts that is provided by Jay. So just a really big thank you to the Bartush Family Foundation and to Jay Bartush today, because all of these things that we do would not be possible without the support of everyone that donates to the foundation. But in particular, just want to highlight those unique and special donations made by Jay. So thanks so much. And also now I just want to remind everybody that we do have time for a Q&A at the end. So even though we aren't in person, you can utilize the chat feature or the Q&A feature throughout the lecture. And I will actually come on at the end and have and read some of those selected questions for our speaker. So hang out for that if you're interested. But with that, I am going to hand things over to the Executive Director of the Palm Springs Opera Guild of the Desert, Lori Baldwin, to introduce today's speaker.
Hi, everybody. I want to thank everyone for joining us today. And also, I would like to thank the Buck Foundation and Rancho Mirage Library and Observatory for partnering with us on this great lecture series that we have for you in 2022. Just so everyone does know, the Palm Springs Opera Guild is a 501c3 nonprofit organization, and we want to invite you to join to become a member of the Opera Guild and come out and just see what we do. You can join us at www.palmspringsoperaguild.org for more information. So today, I'd like to introduce today's Who's Afraid of Opera, a heroic women who do not die, lecturer Clifford Cranna. Kip is a dramaturg emeritus of San Francisco Opera, where he served on the staff for over 40 years, 30 of them as a director of music administration. He has managed the commissions of more than 20 new operas. He was awarded the San Francisco's Opera Medal, the company's highest honor, and the Bernard Osher Cultural Award for distinguished efforts to bring excellence to a cultural institution. He holds a BA in music from the University of North Dakota and a PhD in musicology from Stanford University. Please help me welcome Mr. Kip Cranna.
Thank you, Lori, and thank you, TJ, and thank you, Jay, for your support and guidance in this series that we call Who's Afraid of Opera? A pleasure to be back, and I wish I could be there in person. You know the reason why, and hopefully I'll be there next month for another talk on a different topic in person. That's certainly a goal. I always get asked, what's a dramaturg? And I just use the simple explanation that it's kind of like a fancy term for scholar in residence. My work at San Francisco Opera was largely administrative, nuts and bolts, but because I have a background in musicology, I also did that sort of thing as well. And that's, of course, what leads me into talks like this. And this topic came about because people have often said, and you often hear this complaint, particularly from feminists, who argue that opera is so anti-women. The poor heroines in opera are victimized and meet terrible ends, and they're always being incredibly persecuted by the men in the stories. And yeah, that's true to some extent, but I want to counter that with some other examples in this talk. So let me get into my screen sharing and share my screen with my PowerPoint, and we'll get started with that. I have to get rid of those floating controls that block a screen, and we'll get to the start of this. I love the graphics that the Palm Springs Opera Guild came up with for my Who's Afraid of Opera talk, so I thought I'd show that to you. And here's my title slide: Heroic Women in Opera Who Don't Die. And here's a little explanation of what I want to talk about today. Opera is full of grand and passionate heroines who, contrary to the stereotype of the tragic operatic victim, bravely overcome their obstacles and don't die. Let's explore the fascinating heroism of intrepid female characters through the centuries in the multifaceted world of opera. Women who valiantly face their challenges, defy the odds, and emerge triumphant, all amid the sounds of glorious music and impassioned singing. Now, you know the standard rep. Many of you are opera fans, so you know that most of the operatic heroines in the really popular operas tend to meet tragic ends. These are the 10 most performed operas in the last decade, the decade that we have comprehensive data on. And of course, in the early 20s, COVID sort of messed things up program-wise. But anyway, in the teens, I should say, the 20 teens, La Bohème was the #1 most performed opera in the United States. And of course, poor Mimi dies of tuberculosis in that. In Bizet's Carmen, she gets stabbed by her ex at the end. In Verdi's La Traviata, poor Violetta dies of consumption at the end. In Madame or Butterfly, she stabs herself to avoid the shame of her husband leaving her and taking their son. In Tosca, she leaps off a parapet to avoid otherwise being executed. Rossini's The Barber's Fiddle is a comedy, of course, so nobody dies in that. Same with The Magic Flute of Mozart. Mozart's Don Giovanni is a little bit of an outlier. The title character dies, goes to hell, but none of the women die. And in The Marriage of Figaro, of course, that has a happy ending as well. Verdi's Rigoletto, poor Gilda sacrifices herself for the man she loves. So a lot of heroines dying off there. Here's, of course, La Traviata, Violetta on her deathbed, Carmen about to get stabbed by Don José. And there's La Bohème, Morella Freni and Luciano Pavarotti there, and she's dying. There's Tosca about to leap off the parapet, Liana Harutunian there. There's Madame Butterfly about to commit suicide, Veronica Villarreal. And there's Gilda dying in the arms of her father, Rigoletto, Paula Granelli, and Mary Dunleavy. Here's Beverly Sills as Lucia. She sings a mad scene before collapsing in death. We don't know quite what she dies of, madness, I guess. And in Aida, we have both the heroine and the hero die. Aida and Radames die sealed in an Egyptian tomb. There's Leah Crocetto and Brian Jade. In Tristan and Isolde, she dies at the end after he has been wounded. She sings her love death over his body as he's lying there, and then she dies herself again. I say she dies of opera. That's, again, what kills her off. In Otello, of course, he strangles Desdemona out of jealousy, misplaced jealousy, and then he kills himself, realizing his mistake. Placido Domingo and Concha Ricciarelli there from back in the 70s. In Strauss's Salome, Salome contemplates the head of John the Baptist before being crushed to death by Herod's soldiers. Karen Hofstedt there. In Electra, rejoicing that her brother has killed her mother to avenge her father's murder, Electra dances herself to death. So a lot of ways to die for these ladies in opera. But what about surviving heroines? Those who are victorious or defiant and survive at the end. I'm going to take a look at Penelope in Monteverdi's The Return of Ulysses, Rodelinda in Handel's Rodelinda, Pamina in Mozart's The Magic Flute, Leonora in Beethoven's Fidelio, Isabella in Rossini's The Italian Girl in Algiers, Orabella in Verdi's Attila. There might be one that's not too familiar. Minnie in Puccini's Girl of the Golden West, Susanna in Carlyle Floyd's Susanna, Sister Helen in Jake Hagee's Dead Man Walking, and Dame Shirley in John Adams' Girls of the Golden West. So let's plunge right in and take a look at some of these heroines. Starting with Penelope in Monteverdi's The Return of Ulysses, one of the very early operatic masterpieces. As you probably know, opera as an art form was kind of created around the year 1600. And so by 1640, real masterpieces were emerging. This one, of course, is based on the Odyssey of Homer, Odysseus in Greek. He was called Ulysses by the Romans, and he had been off the Trojan War, and it took him 20 years to get home to his faithful wife, Penelope, waiting for him. And everyone assumes he's dead, and there are all these suitors surrounding her, trying to get her to admit that he's dead and marry one of them. So here is the scene of the suitors trying to get her to love again, and she rejects all their entreaties. This is Janet Baker as Penelope. I should mention that this is from a recording back in the 70s, orchestration by Raymond Lepard, who helped sort of bring these 17th century pieces back to the operatic stage. But this kind of rather lush modern orchestration is nothing that Monteverdi himself would have recognized. And nowadays people tend to do a more quote unquote authentic kind of orchestration. But I love this performance with Janet Baker. Here's the scene where Ulysses has come back to her and is trying to persuade her rather, that he is who he is. Penelope does not recognize Ulysses. He's been gone 20 years and refuses to believe he is truly her husband until he describes the coverlet on her bed, which no other man but he has ever seen. But in this production, they don't leap into each other's arms. She hasn't seen him in 20 years, and she's been sort of married to her grief over this time. So it takes a little while for them to get back together physically. But here's the very end of the opera. So Penelope, one of our early non-tragic operatic heroines. I love these operas from the 17th century. She's steadfast and determined, and she wins out. Let's go on now to another heroine, this time from the 18th century, Handel's Rodelinda. And here's our setup for this. Rodelinda's husband has been driven from his throne, and she believes him dead. His usurper, Grimoaldo, tries to force her to marry him, threatening to kill her young son if she does not consent. What a guy. Knowing him to be spineless and cowardly, she fearlessly calls his bluff. She will marry him if he personally murders her son before her very eyes. She cannot be both the wife of the usurper and the mother of the rightful heir. Here's Dorothea Rushman as Rodelinda.
Pensaci e vedi che essendo tu mio sposo, io tuo consorte, io sposo la vendetta, e tu la morte. Quanto è corto e fedele oggi è costei, quanto s'oppone ai grandi disegni miei.
So her husband there in disguise overhearing, and the guy who has his evil designs on her is frustrated. And we start her da capo aria. We'll listen to the orchestral introduction, which is called a ritornello, and then she'll start her aria. All right, so a defiant heroine then, and she wins out with her bravery, and there's a happy ending. Here's a shot from the Met's version of this. Of course, what we just watched was in modern dress. We actually did this same production here at San Francisco Opera from Munich. There's a more period costuming ending there. Let's go on to Pamina and Mozart's The Magic Flute, who is a heroine true and true. And we're going to watch the scene where Tamino and Pamina, prince and princess who are destined for one another, face the trials of fire and water. They have to prove themselves brave enough to be welcomed into the wise Sarastro's sacred order. And notice the phrase that Pamina uses when she joins Tamino for this trial. She says, "Ich selber führe dich." I myself shall lead you. So a stage director who pays attention to that will have her grab him by the arm and lead him forward to the trials. I've rarely seen that happen, but that's the way it should happen. Here is the scene where Pamina and Tamino are reunited after various other tests so that they can undergo the trials of fire and water. Once again, Dorothea Rushman here as Pamina and Piotr Bechala as Tamino. Pause just for a second. People often get confused by the mixture of languages here. They are singing in German, of course. This opera is in German. Someone has put in French subtitles, and then I have added English ones. So that's where we've got this polylingual setup here. Let's go on with the scene. if you follow the text properly, this is the point where she would take him by the arm and lead him into the fire. But as I say, in many productions, including this one, they sort of walk in side by side. All right, let's go on to the middle of, or the early, I should say, part of the 19th century with Beethoven's only opera, Fidelio, his only completed opera. He tried various others. And we have a real heroine in this one. The story, of course, is that Leonora has disguised herself as a boy, Fidelio, in order to get a job at the prison where her husband, Florestan, is unjustly imprisoned. And she manages to rescue him just at the last minute when he's about to be executed. She intervenes and stops it from happening, and she saves his life. Here is Janet Napolitano talking about the opera Fidelio.
Well, I think there are several themes in Fidelio that are very relevant today. One is the whole issue of women leaders, and Leonora is definitely a leader.
Definitely she is. And here's a scene from the production that we just did here in San Francisco a couple of months ago. It was meant to be in 2020, which was the centenary, the bicentenary the bicentenary of the 250th. That was, I'm trying to get my dates right, 250th birthday for Beethoven, but that was postponed, of course, because of COVID. Here is the aria that Leonora sings, voicing her determination to be victorious in saving her husband's life. This is Gwyneth Jones from back in a film from back in the 1970s.
Ich folge dem Innentriebe, ich warte nicht, ich werde verletzt, ich ruhe
A very young Gwyneth Jones. Well done, Gwyneth. All right, going on to a comedy, but with a very plucky heroine, the Italian Girl in Algiers by Rossini, one of a number of operas that sort of make fun of the Turks, the people of the Ottoman Empire. This happens in Mozart's The Abduction from the Seraglio, and to some extent in the Turkey in Italy of Rossini, and various other operas where, to some extent also even in Così fan tutte, where two Albanians, quote unquote, appear. But of course, that was part of the Ottoman Empire at the time. The situation here is that Isabella has gone off trying to find her missing fiance, Lindoro, who was shipwrecked and is now captive, made slave at the court of a bey, that's B-E-Y, which is a government official, kind of like I think it's a provincial governor in the Ottoman Empire. She herself now has become shipwrecked and brought into the bey's harem, but she is very plucky and determined not to let that bother her. Here's Marilyn Horne voicing her determination in coloratura excellence.
Quasi l'effetto d'un sguardo tutti la bravano, tutti la chiamano, la femmina, felicità, la femmina, felicità,
One of Marilyn Horne's famous 2-octave leaps there at the end. And of course, she does save the day. She manages to get all the captive Italians free. She sings a patriotic song to rouse them, and off they go to their freedom. All right, here's a heroine you may not know so much about, Orabella in Verdi's Attila. This, of course, is an opera about Attila the Hun. Attila is rampaging his way through Italy, and he is rather shocked to find that among the captives that are brought into him are warrior women. One of them, the feisty Orabella, and she shows her pluck and determination. And the story is based on a rumor that one of Attila's wives murdered him on their wedding night. And that, in fact, is what happens in this opera. She pretends to sort of go along with becoming his bride because he admires her courage so much. And then she does kill him at the end. Here is Russian soprano Elena Pankrotova as Orabella and Ildar Abdrazikov as Attila. You'll notice that this vocal part for Orabella is very strenuous. It's one of these sort of harsh sounding pieces that, or parts that I should say, that Verdi wrote in his youth. Another one like that is the role in Nabucco of Abigail. Lady Macbeth is also one of these sort of very forceful vocal parts, as you'll see in just a second. So you can see that this is not meant to be a pretty voiced part. It's more forceful than that. That was her entrance recitative, and now she launches into an aria all about the bravery of Italian women. Attila is smitten, and he decides that he wants to make her his bride. All right, moving on to Puccini now, the Verismo period in operas, it's called, sort of a realism, the idea of sort of everyday characters. And this is an opera based on an American play, actually a playwright, David Belasco, who spent some time in San Francisco and was in the Gold Rush days in Gold Rush camp. And so he wrote a play about that experience, which Puccini then used to make into an opera. Puccini had adapted an earlier play by Belasco called Madame Butterfly or Madame Butterfly. So this opera premiered at the Metropolitan Opera in New York. And there's Minnie, Deborah Voigt as Minnie when we did the piece here in 2010. And here's a quick synopsis of the scene we're going to watch. Sheriff Jack Rance, who lusts for Minnie, has pursued the bandit Johnson and wounded him. Minnie, who loves Johnson, has sheltered him in her cabin. Rance discovers the fugitive, who has passed out from his wound. Desperate, Minnie proposes a poker game. If Rance wins, he will take both of them, Johnson to jail and Minnie to bed. If she wins, Johnson is hers. Rance agrees to the stakes and they play 3 rounds. At the final hand, Rance exultantly throws down 3 kings. Nearly fainting, Minnie finds the courage to cheat and risks Rance's terrible vengeance. Listen to the throbbing basses, the string basses, how they give this sort of pulsing tension to the scene. Here we go.
Talia. Solamente che t'avrò fra le mie braccia. Credi, ti vinco. Questo c'è che te. Qualche cosa sto male. Che devo darvi?
That's a hallmark of the Verismo style, this sort of superheated, supercharged dramatic emotion there as Minnie cheats and wins. And Sheriff Jack Rance, villain that he is, at least lives up to his part of the bargain. Here is a scene from the production where Minnie rescues him a second time. It's from our production back in 2010, because he's caught again and is about to be hanged until she intervenes. Here's another scene where she comes in to save him from being hanged. And here's Deborah Voigt on a horse coming in to stop the hanging just in time. Here is the very ending of The Girl of the Golden West as the two of them go off into the sunset together.
I do,
Dio, California. All right, let's go on to Carlisle Floyd, who died just recently. He was in his 90s, sort of a grand old man of American opera from the middle of the century. His opera, Susanna, from 1955, is one of the great American operas from the mid 20th century. It's based on the book of Susanna, the story of Susanna and the elders in the book of Daniel in the Greek version of the Hebrew Bible. When the Hebrew Bible was translated into Greek, in this story was added in to the book of Daniel. You won't find it in a regular Protestant Bible nowadays, but you'd find it in a scholarly Bible or in a Catholic Bible. And the story is that Susanna was this beautiful married woman, and these lustful elders spied on her while she was bathing, and they then tried to force her to have sex with them. And when she refused, they impugned her reputation. They said they saw her having sex with a young man. The prophet Daniel steps in and rescues her, and she is exonerated. So Carlisle Floyd took this story and translated it into a setting in the rural South in Tennessee in the middle of the century. And it's a little bit of a commentary on the sort of McCarthy era where character assassination was so easily done. So Susanna is spied upon while she's bathing out in the woods, and the elders then impugn her reputation, and she's rejected by society. Here is her aria that shows her innocence and her naivete as she's singing about what a beautiful night it is. So this innocent girl from the backwoods can be easily deceived by the lustful preacher, Ellen Blitch. And she is, of course, blamed for everything, and the townspeople turn against her, but she remains defiant and survives at the end. All right, let's go on to Dead Man Walking from the year 2000 by local composer here in San Francisco, Jay Kagi, and the late, great Terrence McNally, the wonderful playwright of many plays, including Master Class, for example. Terrence was one of the very early victims of COVID in the early part of 2000, which was a great tragedy. They based their story on Sister Helen Prejean's memoir. It's not a novel, it's a memoir about her book about her work, I should say, with death row inmates. And we premiered the opera here in 2000. It's become one of the most successful operas of the 21st century. Been done on 5 continents and more than 70 productions now. And it is slated to be done at the Metropolitan Opera in a very soon coming season. Here's Sister Helen in real life. And of course, there was a famous film based on that. Susan Sarandon won the Oscar for her portrayal of Sister Helen. A very different character in the movie than the real life person. The real life person is determined and fearless, whereas Susan Sarandon's character was sort of fragile and self-doubting. Here is a trailer that kind of describes the opera in a nutshell.
Dead man walking.
He will gather us around,
This is current. This is life that's going on now. In a way, the opera is the fullest artistic expression because you not only see acting out in front of you the murder, then that leads to the execution, the stories of everybody in between, the murder victims' families being told the death penalty is what's going to heal them, the mother of the death row inmate saying, my child, I've lost my child, slipped through my fingers, me stuck in the middle. And people will go on that journey with us together. If you don't touch emotions in some of the deep questions, moral questions, in a way we can never come to a satisfactory stance or position on anything.
So a real life hero in there in Sister Helen. Here is her a little bit later talking about the opera here in San Francisco in 2019.
First time I saw the opera in San Francisco, and the curtain opened, and out came Sister Helen singing My Journey. What it did for me was it brought the story that I wanted to bring close to the American public in the deepest possible way through the fullness of art, which opera is. I mean, I sometimes say you ought to have seatbelts in the seats in an opera because you witness the murder of two innocent people. You know who did it. You see him. He's not remorseful. There's a part of your heart saying, bring it on. Then you meet the parents, the victim's family, and it brings people through an incredible journey. I'm Sister Helen Prejean, and I'm the author of Dead Man Walking. I invite you into this journey. The aria of my character is my journey, but you as an audience are going to go to very deep places that the opera is going to take you into through live drama and through wonderful music that will instruct your heart as you make the journey.
Right, let's listen to a little bit of that journey. Sister Helen is a nun in New Orleans, and she's become a pen pal of the guy on death row at Angola State Prison. And now he said he wants to meet her. He wants her to become his spiritual advisor. So on her drive to Angola, she ponders the steps that she's taking.
This journey to Christ, this journey to my God, this journey to myself, to my Jesus, to this end, this journey to the truth, this journey.
And here is the rest of the aria with another singer.
I'm going to die, he writes me. I haven't a chance. Does he want me to help him to die? Is he afraid?
When we obtained the rights from Sister Helen to adapt her book for an opera, she did not insist on any sort of editorial involvement. She didn't ask for script approval, so to speak. She did say to Terence McNally, the librettist, don't give me a lot of Hail Marys and Our Fathers. I'm not that kind of nun. But and Terence couldn't resist putting a prayer or two in there. Opera's full of prayers. Verdi's operas, as you probably know, even though he wasn't a religious man, put lots of prayers in his opera. It seems to be something that works in opera. Here is the final scene of the opera from a production in Madrid, where Sister Helen sings this spiritual that Jay Kagi has composed, but it sounds like a traditional African-American spiritual. He will gather us around. All right, a real life heroine in Sister Helen Prejean. All right, I've got one more heroine to talk to you about and we'll be done. And that is from John Adams and Peter Sellers' Girls of the Golden West, about life in the mining camps here in California during the gold rush. Peter Sellers has assembled a libretto from various sources, including the so-called Shirley letters by a woman named Louise Amelia Clapp, Louise Clapp, who styled herself as Dame Shirley. She wrote a whole bunch of letters to her sister, supposedly, but they were really obviously intended for publication because she was extremely literate and wonderfully clever in describing life as a doctor's wife in a mining camp. She said, "You have no idea of this wild and barbarous life." And she described it wonderfully. One phrase I remember from her memoirs, she talked about the rustic cabin they were in. The floor was so slanted that no piece of furniture could do but hobble on three legs like a dog with a sore foot. Here is a little bit of the opera, Julia Bullock as Louise Clapp, AKA Dame Shirley. By the way, the Shirley letters are available online. Just Google Shirley letters and you can read them yourself. They're wonderful.
You have no idea of the hand-to-mouth sort of style in which most men in this country are in the habit of living. You have no idea of this wild and barbarous life, seeing the elephant rubbing for gold. Some say that I ought to be put into a straitjacket. Some say I was undoubtedly mad to think of such a thing as cunning him.
I had not heard that phrase, seeing the elephant, until I encountered it in this opera, but I looked into that. It was a phrase common in the gold rush, and was evidently also common in the Civil War. It meant getting out there, seeing the world, having adventures, and seeing what life is like. All right, heroines in opera who don't die. We've looked at Penelope in The Return of Ulysses, Rodelinda in Rodelinda, Pamina in The Magic Flute, Leonora in Fidelio, Isabella in The Italian Girl in Algiers, Orabella in Attila, Minnie in Girl of the Golden West, Susanna in Susanna, Sister Helen in Dead Man Walking, and Dame Shirley in Girls of the Golden West. So there are plenty of wonderful heroines, and I've missed out on your favorite heroine in opera who doesn't die. I'm sorry about that, but maybe we can assemble another program about such wonderful characters. I hope to see you in about a month's time, February 15th, hopefully in person, where we will be talking about operas about liberation. I'm calling it Let Freedom Sing. So let's all meet up again in about a month's time, and I look forward to seeing you then. I'll get out of screen share now and see if I have any questions that I can possibly try to answer for you. TJ, is there anything that has come up?
There are. Thank you so much. That was absolutely fantastic. We do have a couple of questions that have come in, and then if anyone has questions that they'd like to ask, go ahead, and this would be the time to type that into either the Q&A box or the chat feature. So it looks like we have a question from Alicia, and the question is, how long do opera singers study before they become pros?
Oh, well, it varies, of course. Some people discover that they sing well in childhood, and they sing in children's choruses and so forth, and then get encouraged to go into opera. Almost always, opera singers nowadays will have had formal training as a vocalist in college or conservatory. The raw talent out of the church choir that somehow makes it onto the big stage just doesn't happen anymore because it's way too competitive. There are so many people, especially in America, so many fine singers being turned out by our conservatories and music departments in colleges that you really are too far behind if you haven't had that kind of training in technique, in repertoire, and especially in languages, because it's very hard to catch up if you've never studied a foreign language and are trying to make it in opera. So it's a long process for most singers, certainly starting typically in high school and going on to graduate level. So probably there's a 10-year span in there that you need to develop into operatic career potential. I would say that it's the path is longer for basses. Basses often don't discover that they can really sing until they're almost 30. And of course, the career is longer for men, particularly basses, low voices, and shorter for sopranos, who often are sort of ended their career by their mid-50s. So it sort of balances out that way, I suppose.
Okay, looks like we have a question from Alicia. She's wondering, are there any Black or Asian opera singers?
Oh yes, a great many. And the opera stages today are really populated with a great number of them. Here in San Francisco next spring, we'll be reviving a piece of ours by the Chinese-American composer Bright Sheng called Dream of the Red Chamber, which is based on a very famous 18th century beloved Chinese novel. And that will have an entire cast of Asian-American singers, as we did when we first did it. And African-American singers are really making a big splash nowadays. Of course, they've been a main part of the repertoire for decades. Who can forget the glorious Leontine Price, who is still with us, I believe, in her 90s. I'm thinking of singers like Leonard White, and the list goes on and on. Carolyn Blackwell, Kathleen Battle, Leona Mitchell. Wow, I could think of lots. Shirley Verrett is being mentioned there as well. So yeah, the African Americans I admire so much include Eric Owens, who has sung here Porgy and Bess with us very successfully, and along with various other parts. And I'm also love Lawrence Brownlee, who is a coloratura tenor, who recently sang Don Pasquale of Donizetti here with us in San Francisco. And lots more. I'm sorry, you're catching me off guard here to name a lot of them, but yes, indeed, lots of talent in the African American singing community, and we're seeing more and more of them now as they come out of conservatories and and music departments.
Okay, great. If anyone has a last question here, this is your chance. So just want to remind you. Looks like Jay had a comment. Sister Helen is an inspiration to all, truly a saint among us. Maybe some Strauss heroines next time?
Yes, well, we have a few there. Certainly, the Rosenkavalier has a heroine who survives, and she's not in too much peril of her life to begin with, but there's some others that we could think of in Strauss as well.
All right, well, I don't see any further questions coming in at this point. So I'll let you sign off, but before you do, I just want to remind everyone that today's lecture, if you couldn't see the whole thing or you want to share it with someone else, you can check out our YouTube channel. By this time next week, we should have today's lecture up there for everybody. And thank you so much to everyone for joining us today. And then Kip, do you want to remind them about our program next month and sign off?
Yes, on the 15th of February, the topic is Let Freedom Sing, operas about liberation. So I hope to see you then. Thanks very much for tuning in today. It's a pleasure.